We're all used to seeing people walking around carrying their electronic devices such as cell phones. But could we soon have a more intimate relationship with those devices? We'll talk about that next on Global Perspectives.
This program is made possible, in part, by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office, the Global Connections Foundation, and the India Center at UCF.
This is Global Perspectives with Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator John Bercia, Special Assistant to the President for Global Perspectives at the University of Central Florida.
Hello and welcome to Global Perspectives. In the last few decades, the Internet has grown from linking a few experts in labs to connecting all of humanity through computers and mobile devices. The information era does not stand still, though. What could be next? For example, could machines be embedded in people? Today's guest, Ayesha Khanna, will help us understand these and other ideas in what some call the hybrid age, a new era in human technology interaction, which liberates, constrains, and fundamentally changes the way people live and societies operate. Khanna is the author of Hybrid Reality, Preparing for the Age of Human Technology Coevolution. She is also the founder and co-director of the Hybrid Reality Institute, a think tank focusing on the intersection of technology trends, data intelligence, and geopolitics. Welcome to the show, Ms. Khanna.
Thank you for having me here.
What is all this conversation about hybrid age, hybrid realities, hybrid possibilities? For the uninitiated, what does this mean?
Well, the hybrid age I like to think of as the fifth era of human technology interaction. So we go all the way back to all the different eras that have spawned every time technology has changed, right from the Stone Age to when we started crop cultivation in the Agrarian Age, all the way through the Industrial Age with steam power and other technologies, and then the Information Age, where most of us think we still are at with the dawn of the World Wide Web in 1989, and before that, the personal computer. We are now entering another era when technology is fundamentally changing. And whenever it changes the way that our economy works and our society works. And this new age we're calling the hybrid age. And essentially technology is changing in four ways. It's becoming ubiquitous, intelligent, social, and integrated.
Maybe could you put that into everyday language so that the average viewer could grasp and maybe give us something tangible to show what that means?
Absolutely. So let's think about the four characteristics that I just talked about. So the first is ubiquitous. We have technology every day in our lives in the form of gadgets, discrete objects like the mobile phone or the laptop. But really imagine if technology was embedded in every aspect of our lives, every part of the built environment, in the form of very small, almost invisible sensors that can collect data and also return data and exchange it with each other. They could even be embedded in our own bodies. Take the example of Proteus Biotech, which actually produced a small pill which you can take, and when you have taken and ingested it, the sensor on it informs via email your child or your granddaughter that you have taken your medication. So that's an example of a very almost invisible-like sensor or computer that will be ubiquitous in our environment. The second thing is it's becoming intelligent. Now we are used to adding knowledge and using computers for decision support and basically for processing and exchanging information. But now we're going to see them emerge much more as intelligent advisors and in fact autonomously taking decisions according to our preferences that they keep in everyday life. And the most, I think, recent example of this is Siri, which is the assistant in the iPhone. It's not very sophisticated, but that's just the beginning of a helper artifact or intelligence that uses minimal low-level intelligence that far surpasses what we've seen before. The third thing then is that it's becoming integrated. And what I mean by integrated is that different forms of technology, which include the sciences, really technology with a big T, are becoming integrated. So biology is integrating with mechanical engineering and electronics to make biomechatronics. And that is the field that is responsible for creating some of the most advanced prosthetics in the world. So when sciences now and technologies come together in such unprecedented ways, we're just going to see a proliferation of unexpected products and services emerge from them. And finally, technology is taking on a human face. Our interaction with it at the moment is quite artificial. But imagine if we talk to all computers through voice and gestures. And in fact, they were not just blank computer screens, but were in the form of cute little robots or in the form of avatars. And there's a seal called Paro. It's a furry white seal, and it has a little bit of intelligence in it, and people in old people's home really respond to it and actually form social relationships with it. This is unprecedented in our, with stone tools, obviously we had no relationship. So this is very, very unexpected, and it will fundamentally change things.
I'm still thinking about the pill and what would be involved, and I'm guessing, thinking back to the old Cold War espionage days when people swallowed transmitters and things, but here we're talking about technology that is so tiny, it probably wouldn't even be disruptive at all to the system.
No, it would not. It would actually be just coated on the pill, it would be ingested, and it would not in any way have any negative effect on the body itself. And I think that coming back to espionage, I think that that's a very interesting point that you raised, because one of the big things that we need to be concerned about in the hybrid age is there's this proliferation of intelligence and information, but who owns it? Who controls it? Is it corporations? Is it governments? We have to look within ourselves and become almost activist in our relationship with technology and force those who create and design technologies for us to be transparent on how they're using it.
Because this could fundamentally change the way we view everything, including human rights.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I personally think that access to technology and access to information is a human right. But there's a great deal of inequity in the way that technologies are distributed in the world at the moment. We will see a change in this, because as technologies become more modular and as the cost of computer storage becomes cheaper, it'll be easier for people in Africa and South Asia and other poor countries to access information over the mobile phones. But who is also accessing the information of how they're interacting with the mobile phone? It's the telecom companies or Facebook or some other companies. And I think that, is privacy a human right? People increasingly think that we would have to pay for that right. So I think what we're seeing now is the emergence of a new social contract. And the problem with this new social contract is that it is not being put to vote. It is happening in very insidious and very silent ways. And part of what we do at the Institute is celebrate technology, but also encourage people to make informed decisions and to be aware of the pitfalls of this age of rapid and accelerating technological evolution.
How does it work generation to generation? Because I'm thinking, I've been using computers and communicating by email since the early 1980s, long before a lot of other people did on intranets. But the average person can barely keep up with all of these changes. Young people seem to adapt very quickly, but the majority of the population seems to be always a little bit behind. And when I've heard you talk publicly, I see people in the audience who are sort of scratching their heads and not really understanding certain points. How do we ensure that people keep up with technology so that they really understand, as you said, what's going on?
I think that's a fundamental point, and I think it's for a lot of nonprofits and activists to come in and act as what I call technology Sherpas, where they guide people in understanding this labyrinth of complex technologies that is coming towards us, this deluge of technologies that is coming towards us, and to interpret it and to translate it in ways that is easier for the common population to understand. And I think that is a basic civil right now, and the government should provide this service, because there is a tendency for us to be passive recipients of technology, and there's also a tendency to say that it's too complicated. And you know, in a past life, having worked in villages in Pakistan and worked with very poor people and uneducated people, there is no such thing as being ill-equipped to understand a complicated message if it's explained to you properly. So we are underestimating people of all ages, no matter how old they are or how young they are, and their ability to adapt in a positive way as long as we give them the information.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see, you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges, but could you elaborate as we go forward? What are the challenges that we're likely to encounter in this hybrid age?
Well, I think one of the challenges that we'll see, especially in the sphere of biotech, is that there are some advances and enhancements, such as, for instance, outfitting oneself with nootropics or drugs that make you cognitively much more superior than your classmates or colleagues, that are only possible either in countries that allow commercialization of those drugs. So in a place like US, where it takes $1 billion and 10 years to bring a therapy to market, we may never have these drugs on the market. In that case, they'll only be available on the black market. And in countries in Asia, they may actually subsidize these drugs. So what happens is we're used to this concept of the digital divide, where, but now we'll see this biotech divide, where people who are enhanced or have subsidies from their governments to become more than human will actually be much better at navigating the labor force than we are. And in the broader picture, this puts America at a great disadvantage.
Yeah, I'm seeing competitiveness issues coming into this, and we're already talking about how we're decreasing, relatively speaking, in our competitiveness globally, and the rising or emerging economies. And if you think about those in combination with what you just mentioned, it sounds pretty frightening.
It is frightening. On the other hand, you know, this is just the nature of technology. It's a double-edged sword, essentially. So that's one side of it. On the other side, the fact that so many people are connected, that 2 billion already connected to the internet, 5 billion with mobile phones. Eventually, everyone on the planet will have a mobile phone. This means that we have the emergence of what we can call a connected brain or a global brain. And with the profusion of education facilities that are provided free online, like Audacity or the Khan Academy, we have many more people from poorer countries that haven't had access to education now able to participate in the search for solving the grand challenges of the 21st century, like poverty, like climate change. So I think that the point here is not to be excessively frightened or to be excessively utopian, but to understand that the march of technology has begun. It's different, and we have to harness it in ways that are informed.
My first impulse was to think in terms of addressing and fixing the problems of the world, but I'm sure there are people out there who are in another realm who like to cause trouble and then otherwise be disruptive, and I'm guessing that these technologies could be used in those ways with devastating results.
I think that's one of the issues, is that you have this large population, and one of the wonderful things about a connected world is that anybody can connect to it. But this means that even those characters who are evil or dictators or are hackers or cyber thieves, that means they also have easy accessibility to all these wonderful digital education modules or other kinds of bio modules. And we have to find ways to keep them at bay. And it's going to be a big challenge for us as we go on in the century to be able to do that.
And how do you deal with countries that have a political system that is authoritarian, that can actually orchestrate all of these things, use the technology because it doesn't have the system we have here that requires so many years for it to be considered? And if this is a rising economy with resources, it could become a really potent force globally.
Absolutely, and I think the state sponsorship of technology is a whole new angle on which we have to see geopolitics and geoeconomics. In fact, if you look at the geostrategy of any country, it really now has 3 pillars. Geoeconomics, geopolitics we're used to from the 19th and 20th century, but in the 21st century we have to think, what is a geotechnical strategy and what are its implications? And so in terms of the East Asian countries or even the resource-rich countries of the Middle East, we are seeing now that they're investing large amounts of money in attracting the best talent in the sciences and technology. And what are they going to do with this? Part of the answer is they're going to build their manufacturing bases. They're going to increase their exports. but they might do other things with it also, such as create better military tools, or even, like I said, subsidize genetic enhancements for their population. So it's going to look like a very different world on the global scale. And I think that this is something that we all need to take into account now.
It seems that it also will pose a major challenge for education, especially in the United States. We're already talking about the inadequacies of what we offer relative to the rest of the world, and how can we do it better? We have a wonderful world-class, especially college and university level educational system here, but you have to keep the content and the approaches and everything current so that we are aware of what's going on in competitiveness and competitive. But what would you say needs to be done in the education setting to enhance the skills that our young people are acquiring so that they will go out into the workforce and be able to compete?
Well, I think we need to go back to Seymour Papert, who was at MIT, and really think about the philosophy of education. Because now we have a lot of MIT, Stanford, a lot of other companies like Udacity, which was started by Stanford Professor Sebastian Thrun, that are offering incredible free courses online. But really what we need to think about is, in this age, it's not only about getting instruction, it's about the construction of knowledge. So we need to change our approach entirely from instruction to construction. And the person who thinks about it best is actually Salman Khan, who has the Khan Academy. And essentially what he's talked about is what he calls flipping the school system, where he says that all of us should actually use computers and technology to get education modules online at home. And then when we require specific mentorship, and when we want to create new forms of knowledge or new objects or engineer new kinds of buildings or whatever it may be, we should use mentors, the technology, and teachers at that point to help us, which is kind of, we do the reverse. We go and we sit and we listen to lectures and we struggle on our own. Most of us don't do necessarily, collaborative work. So I think if we are able to change this, we'll find Americans have a great advantage because we are very creative and innovative thinkers. And if we can pool the resources together, both of our teachers and of our peer and our students, then we'll be actually in a much better position to go onto the global labor force as compared to others who are not, who are just the recipients, again, passively of new forms of instruction.
How do you personally stay abreast of what's going on? Because you're sort of in the eye of the storm, you're studying the phenomenon, and that's changing rapidly all around you as you move forward. How do you stay current and actually a little bit ahead of the discussion?
Well, there are three things. One, I mean, there's a lot of information now online, and there's some fantastic resources available. And this has become something that almost all major newspapers and other magazines cover, which is technology. We stay a little bit ahead because we keep in close touch with all the academic research labs in major universities in Europe, Asia, and America. But even that eventually, and I'm pleased to say, comes to the mass media. And the third thing that we do is we travel extensively. And that's important not only because we have face-to-face conversations with a lot of the people and we're able to see the prototypes that are being built, but that we are also able to travel to countries where they're being used experimentally, such as in Japan, for instance, where human-robot interaction and relationships are very much the norm in some respects.
I was going to say, if you could give us an example of without the specifics, of a place you visited where you were involved in an experiment or an application or something that our readers or viewers might find interesting.
And as I mentioned, I'll just mention Japan again. I mean, it's really fascinating how Japan gives us a model society, both in terms of what the future will be like in terms of our relationship with artificial agents, but also what we can learn about what not to do. So you have such examples of people feeling very, very comfortable coming home and talking to their avatars and even marrying their avatars, or computer games. Apart from whether it's healthy or not healthy, it's a question of what kind of society that leads to. And I think that over there we see also that they don't consider them that different from humans. And Hatsune Miku is a great example of a pop star who is a 6-foot tall holographic schoolgirl who has sold out concerts in Tokyo, and she's completely computer synthesized. And on the other hand, as we well know, they are a rapidly aging society. They're not open to immigration, and so they've decided that they will support their aging population by having more robots. So again, this is something we call technique, whereas every culture and every society finds its own path to dealing and adopting technology. The Japanese way is likely not going to be the way of us Americans, but there's something to be learned from that.
What is your next project in terms of research?
I am still working very intensely on the future of urban life and the intersection of cities and technology. As you know, by 2050, over 70% of the population of the world will live in cities, and networked infrastructure in cities could drastically change our lives, both improve the lives and also make us much more vulnerable to Big Brother-like implementation. So that's an area which I'm very interested in.
Is there a particular slice of all of this that really, really draws your attention, something that you stick with consistently over time?
I think that for me, education is a big interest of mine, and both about educating people about technology, but also using technology to improve our own life. And I think the reason is because I come from a family that's very involved in education. My mother was a professor, and also because I'm from a developing country, and I see the potential of mobile education to radically change their access to a socially mobile life where they can actually climb up the social ladder and they can join the global workforce.
I'm listening to you talk about all these technological changes and changes to come, and so many people living in cities. It just seems so infinitely complicated, and we always have disruption at the fringes, whether it's from the natural environment or from people who are interested in disrupting society. Are you optimistic as you look toward the longer term, or optimistic with an understanding that there's going to be a nonstop series of complexities along the way?
Yes, I think the latter, definitely. I am optimistic because I believe that if we make informed decisions and we actually harness the technology to eradicate a number of the ailments that we are facing in the moment, diseases, for instance, poverty, lack of education, I think we can use technology to make a huge difference. But I think that having this kind of positive utopian dance around technology is very immature. And I think that it's very necessary for us to be what I call almost activist in our approach towards technology, like demanding the best from it, like actually looking at it and saying, stating what we want from it, as opposed to letting those who design it dictate what it will be in our lives, which is right now the status quo.
And just a quick question, would you be open to having a machine embedded in you in the future? I kept thinking about that the whole time we were talking.
I mean, yes, I mean, a machine would not, it just depends. Would it, if I had a little sensor that, or let's say I was a conductor, or I like listening to music, if I had something implanted in my ear that was able to make me appreciate music at a deeper level, why not? Yes. If my eyes could see further, absolutely, and we already have the beginnings of these things in LASIK, for instance. Or if I had something in my heart that would make it stronger and I could run longer, absolutely. And I think that's why, almost calling it machines is kind of misleading, because they're small enhancements, and they're very directed, but they're not scary, and if viewed as such.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today, Ms. Khanna.
Thank you so much.
And thank you. For Global Perspectives, I'm John Bercia, and we'll see you next time.
This program is made possible, in part, by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office, the Global Connections Foundation, and the India Center at UCF.